The first time I met Karen Whitmore, she was standing on my porch before I'd even finished unpacking boxes. Clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she'd bitten a lemon. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "I'm Karen, HOA president," she announced. "We value order here. Your moving truck is 10 minutes over the allowed unloading time." That was my welcome to Maplewood Ridge, a picture-perfect neighborhood with manicured lawns, pastel shutters, and one woman who believed she ruled it all. "I'll be done soon," I said, extending a hand. She didn't shake it. Her eyes shifted. Two Rex and Nova, my two Belgian Malinois, sitting obediently by the door. "Those won't do," she said flatly. "Maplewood Ridge doesn't permit aggressive breeds. They're service animals," I replied. "Certified, trained, and protected under federal law." Karen's nostrils flared as if I'd challenged her divine authority. But she didn't push further. Not yet. The following week was a lesson in Karen's law and invisible rulebook, only she seemed to understand. A violation notice appeared in my mailbox. Improper lawn edge alignment. Another followed. Excessive pet footprints on driveway. Petty infractions, designed to needle me into submission. I didn't bite, but Karen wasn't used to resistance. At the next HOA meeting, she made her move. Surrounded by her loyal committee ladies who nodded before she even finished speaking, Karen stood and declared, "We must address the safety risk of having attack dogs in our family community. It's an insurance liability." Whispers floated around the room, eyes darting toward me. I stood calmly, papers in hand. "My service dogs are federally protected," I said. "Any attempt to remove them is a violation of the ADA, I suggest. We not test that in court." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. That meeting ended in a stalemate, but the real battle had begun. Over the next days, her tactics turned from bureaucracy to harassment. I'd catch her parked outside in her golf cart, scribbling furiously on a notepad. She called animal control with anonymous tips. She filed noise complaints when Rex barked once at a passing squirrel. Yet, for every attack, I responded with calm, documented responses. My patience became her frustration. Then came the email subject. Community safety inspections. Immediate compliance required. Karen's message claimed the HOA had authorized random home checks to ensure safety compliance. A thinly veiled excuse to invade my home. I wasn't naive. This wasn't about safety. This was about power. Karen had lost face at the HOA meeting, and now she was grasping for control the only way she knew how, by intimidation. I installed high-grade security cameras that same night, motion sensors, infrared, full perimeter coverage. If Karen planned to step onto my property, I'd be ready. But I underestimated how far she'd go. At 3:14 a.m. my phone buzzed with an alert motion. Detected front porch. Groggy but alert. I opened the camera feed. There she was, Karen Whitmore, HOA queen, clad in black, creeping up my steps with a massive keyring clutched in her hand. She glanced around like a burglar, not realizing her every move was being recorded. My heart rate slowed, not from fear, but from the icy calm of someone who's been here before. She inserted a key labeled Universal Access into my front door. Locked out behind that door, Rex and Nova stood. They knew their job. I didn't rush. I watched as she struggled with the lock, muttering under her breath, convinced that her self-granted authority extended past the law. Then the lock clicked. That was her first and final mistake. I pressed a button on my phone, a silent command Rex and Nova had been trained for. The sound was instantaneous, too deep, resonant growls that made the air hum with warning. Karen froze. The door cracked open an inch. That was all Rex and Nova needed. They surged forward, not to attack, but to confront. Their snarls weren't wild, they were calculated, controlled. Two sentinels announcing, "You will not enter here." Karen stumbled back, tripping over my flower bed, keys clattering onto the concrete. She scrambled to her feet, red-faced, yet still clinging to a title. "The HOA president," she shrieked, breathless. I stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, unamused. "And this is my property. Karen, you've got 5 seconds to leave before you're explaining this to the sheriff." Her mouth opened to argue, but no words came out. For the first time, Karen looked powerless. I didn't need to shout. The cameras were rolling. Evidence was secured. Karen had overplayed her hand as she retreated to her golf cart, muttering curses into the night. I dialed an old army buddy of mine, Deputy Collins of the county sheriff's office. This wasn't over, but it was the beginning of the end for Karen's reign. By dawn, the footage of Karen's 3 a.m. break-in attempt was safely archived on multiple drives. I wasn't naive enough to believe she'd apologize. Karen Whitmore had ruled Maplewood Ridge through fear for years. One failed stunt wouldn't break her. No shit. Double down. Deputy Collins arrived by mid. He stepped out of his cruiser, taking off his hat with a slow shake of his head. "She really tried the master key routine, huh?" I played him the footage on my tablet. Karen's frantic fumbling with the keys, her startled fall, the unmistakable growl of Rex and Nova. Collins watched with a tight-lipped grin. "She's cooked," he said. "But you know she'll spin this as some kind of community safety check." "She can try," I replied, handing him a printed copy of the HOA charter. "There's nothing in here that gives her that kind of authority." Collins took the document, his smile widening. "Perfect. Paperwork's what takes tyrants down. Karen was cited for trespassing and unauthorized entry. It was a start, but Collins and I both knew the fine wouldn't dent her ego. She'd been Maplewood's queen for too long, convinced her version of the rules outweighed the actual law. True to form, the next day, she launched her counterattack. Flyers appeared in every mailbox. Protect our neighborhood. Dangerous attack dogs threaten Maplewood's safety. Beneath the bold letters was a blurry photo of Rex Midune, teeth visible, cropped to look menacing. Karen's narrative was clear. I was the reckless outsider, endangering their suburban paradise. At the bottom of the flyer was an announcement. Emergency HOA meeting, motion to ban aggressive breeds and revoke non-compliant homeowners' privileges. It wasn't subtle. Karen was orchestrating a public execution of my reputation, banking on fear and her usual loyalists to back her up. But this time, she'd underestimated something critical. People were getting tired of her reign. Over the years, Karen's iron grip had created more quiet enemies than she realized. People like Mrs. Alvarez, the sweet widow next door, who had endured fines for planting non-regulation rose bushes, or the Thompsons, a young couple fined for hosting a backyard birthday party without her event approval. The community's patience was thinning, and my ordeal was the spark they needed. The HOA meeting was held at the clubhouse. Karen had set it up to be her courtroom, standing tall at the podium with her loyal board members flanking her like a royal council. The flyers were stacked at every seat, a visual cue of her propaganda machine at work. I arrived early, documents in hand. My seat wasn't even warm before Karen's shrill voice echoed through the hall. We are gathered to address a serious safety concern. Our community has always valued family-friendly environments, and the presence of attack dogs jeopardizes that image. Whispers of agreement rippled through her usual base. Karen thrived on that momentum. Fear, control, her gaze locked onto me. Therefore, I motioned for an immediate ban on aggressive breeds within Maplewood Ridge. Furthermore, I propose revoking privileges such as pool and clubhouse access from any homeowner who refuses compliance. She sat down, satisfied, already envisioning a unanimous vote. I stood, slowly, deliberately. I appreciate Karen's concern for safety, I began, but I'd like to clarify a few points. I pulled out the official ADA documentation for Rex and Nova, placing it on the table for all to see. The federal seal gleamed under the fluorescent lights. These aren't attack dogs, they're certified service animals, trained in compliance with federal regulations. Any attempt to evict them or penalize me for their presence is a direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Karen's smile faltered, but she quickly recovered, waving a dismissive hand. We're a private association. HOA policies allow us to maintain standards as we see fit. Incorrect, I replied. Federal law supersedes HOA bylaws, and to ensure clarity, I've brought along legal counsel ready to pursue litigation if this harassment continues. The room shifted. Karen's board members exchanged nervous glances. Mrs. Alvarez stood up, clearing her throat. Karen, I've lived here for 30 years. You fined me for planting rose bushes. And now you're trying to dictate what medical assistance animals someone can have. Enough is enough. Another voice joined in. Mr. Thompson, holding his toddler son. We're sick of living in fear of every minor infraction. This isn't your kingdom, Karen. The tide had turned. For every accusation Karen lobbed, a neighbor countered with a personal grievance. Years of quiet resentment were boiling over. Motion to dismiss Karen's proposal entirely, Mrs. Alvarez declared. And while we're at it, I motioned for a vote of no confidence in her leadership. Karen's eyes widened, her composure cracking for the first time. She opened her mouth to retort, but no words came. The room, once her court, was now her jury. The motions were seconded. A vote was imminent. Karen's crown was slipping. The clubhouse had never been this quiet. For years, Karen Whitmore's voice had dominated these walls, her decrees unchallenged, her authority absolute. But tonight, the silence wasn't deference, it was the breathless anticipation of a regime on the brink of collapse. Mrs. Alvarez's motion for a vote of no confidence echoed louder than any of Karen's speeches ever had. It wasn't just a challenge, it was a declaration that Karen's reign had gone too far. Karen, ever the performer, straightened her blouse and forced a smile. Let's not be hasty. This isn't personal. I've dedicated years to making Maplewood Ridge a safe and orderly community. My only goal is to protect our standards. But the veneer of control was cracking. The neighbors, emboldened by each other's defiance, weren't buying it. Karen, Mr. Thompson spoke firmly. We've all lived under your protection for too long. But safety doesn't mean control. You find my wife a hanging at swing set, claimed it was a structural hazard. You tried to evict the Alvarez's rose bushes. And now you're targeting a veteran's service dogs. Enough is enough. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen's usual supporters, those who had once nodded along to every word, now looked at the floor, unwilling to meet her gaze. The balance had shifted. Fear was no longer her weapon. It had become her weakness. Realizing her grip was slipping, Karen made one last desperate play. If you all think I'm some tyrant, fine. But remember, I have records of every infraction, every late payment, every non-compliance issue. Do you really want to open Pandora's box? It was a threat, thinly veiled, but a threat nonetheless. That was her fatal mistake. I do, I said, stepping forward. In fact, let's start with this. I held up a flash drive. Security footage of Karen attempting to unlawfully enter my home at 3:14 a.m. with a fabricated master key, trespassing, harassment, attempted illegal entry, recorded, time-stamped, and already filed with the sheriff's department. Gasps filled the room. Karen's complexion went from defiant red to ashen gray. "This is slander," she shrieked. Double quotes, "No, Karen," Deputy Collins said as he entered. From the back of the room, his presence wasn't planned, but it couldn't have been timed better. "It's called evidence." Karen spun to face him. "You can't be here. This is a private meeting." Collins smiled unbothered. "Trespassing is a public offense, Karen, and when you escalate to breaking and entering, it becomes everyone's business." He walked to the front, casually yet deliberately, standing beside me as an unspoken show of solidarity. "Let's make this simple," he continued. "You can either step down as HOA president and avoid further embarrassment, or we can proceed with formal charges. Your choice." Karen's lips trembled. For a woman who thrived on control, having none left was suffocating. She glanced at her board, but they were already retreating, both physically and emotionally, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. I moved for Karen's immediate removal from her position. Mrs. Alvarez repeated. "Seconded," Mr. Thompson added. The vote was swift. Hands shot up across the room, not out of malice, but out of long overdue liberation. When Collins called for opposition, only Karen's hand remained raised, trembling in the air. It was over. Karen's title, her authority, her self-imposed crown all stripped away in the span of minutes. She stormed out of the clubhouse. Her retreat, not the victorious exit she had grown accustomed to, but the bitter march of someone who had been publicly dethroned. But for the rest of us, that night marked a new chapter. As the meeting adjourned, neighbors approached me not out of pity, but with genuine respect. Handshakes, nods of gratitude, even a few apologetic words from those who had once feared siding against Karen. Mrs. Alvarez smiled warmly. "You've done what none of us thought possible. You stood up to her and reminded us that this community belongs to all of us, not just to the loudest voice." "It wasn't just me," I said, looking around at the faces who had found their courage. "It was all of you deciding not to stay quiet anymore." Outside, the night felt different, lighter. Rex and Nova sat calmly beside me, unaware of their role in the evening's turning point, but content nonetheless. As I loaded my papers into my truck, Collins joined me. "Word is Karen's already talking about selling her house," he said with a smirk. "I'd offered to help her pack," I replied, "but I'm afraid my K-9 South might not pass her community standards." Collins laughed, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "Maplewood Ridge just became a lot more livable thanks to you." But I wasn't finished. Karen might have lost her crown, but there was still a mess to clean up, policies to fix, safeguards to install. This victory wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The days following Karen's downfall were eerily quiet. For a woman who had micromanaged Maplewood Ridge to the point of tyranny, her absence was palpable. No more golf cart patrols, no more violation notices. The neighborhood, once suffocating under her watchful glare, began to breathe again. But cleaning up after a dictator isn't as simple as voting them out. Karen had left a tangled web of oppressive rules, fine print designed to keep homeowners in a constant state of compliance. Anxiety. The new interim HOA board, now led by Mrs. Alvarez, wasted no time in starting the cleanup. They invited me to the first reform meeting. "We could use someone with a backbone," Mrs. Alvarez said with a sly grin. "You've proven you're not afraid of ruffling a few feathers." The clubhouse atmosphere had shifted. Instead of tense silence and Karen's condescending tone, there was open dialogue. Neighbors spoke freely, some for the first time in years. The agenda was clear. Dismantle Karen's self-serving amendments and rebuild an HOA that actually served the community. One by one, Karen's absurd regulations were repealed. The footprint cleanliness standard was struck down. The seasonal lawn height enforcement was abolished. Most importantly, a new clause was introduced. No HOA officer shall enter or inspect a property without homeowner consent and a legal warrant. When the vote passed, a round of applause erupted. It wasn't just policy reform, it was a symbolic dismantling of Karen's reign. But Karen wasn't finished yet. Rumors swirled that she had filed a lawsuit for defamation and emotional distress. Her argument that I had orchestrated a smear campaign against her. It was laughable, given the mountain of evidence she had provided herself. Deputy Collins called me after hearing the news. "Let her waste her money. Every lawyer in town knows this is a dead case." He was right. Within a week, her case was dismissed. Karen's tantrum had no legal legs to stand on. The final nail in the coffin came 2 weeks later when a for sale sign appeared on her perfectly trimmed lawn. No grand farewell, no victory lap, just a silent, bitter retreat. The morning her moving truck arrived, I was walking Rex and Nova past her house. She saw us from her porch, sunglasses masking her expression, but her stiff posture betrayed the humiliation. For a moment, she seemed ready to say something, but instead, she turned away, vanishing into her hollowed-out kingdom. Good riddance, Mr. Thompson muttered as he joined me. He handed Nova a treat. The HOA has already approved. A community barbecue. No event permits needed this time. The event was more than a barbecue. It was a celebration of reclaiming the neighborhood. Kids played without parents nervously checking for clipboard patrols. Laughter replaced whispered complaints. People brought dishes Karen would have deemed non-compliant, and no one cared. During a toast, Mrs. Alvarez raised her glass and said, "We owe a lot to this man and his two guardians." She pointed to me, Rex, and Nova. They reminded us that fear only holds power when we let it. I wasn't one for speeches, but I said what needed to be said. This was never just about HOA rules. It was about standing up when it's uncomfortable, when it's easier to stay silent. Karen thought she owned this place because no one pushed back. That ends now. This community belongs to all of us. The applause that followed wasn't just for MIT, was for the collective courage that had finally surfaced as dusk settled. Deputy Collins pulled me aside. "By the way, the new board is thinking about creating a neighborhood watch program. They want you involved. You interested?" I smiled, glancing at Rex and Nova, who sat alert, scanning the surroundings with their usual calm focus. "We're always watching," I said. The following week, a new family moved into Karen's old house. They introduced themselves warmly, with no airs of superiority, no clipboards, just genuine neighbors looking for a fresh start. The HOA, once a weaponized tool of control, transformed into what it was always meant to be: a community organization, serving its people, not ruling them. Karen's name faded into neighborhood legend, a cautionary tale of power misused. As for me, life returned to its quiet rhythm. Morning runs with Rex and Nova. Porch conversations with neighbors who now smiled with ease. The tranquility wasn't born of fear but of respect. Yet every so often I'd catch a glint of Karen's SUV passing through town. No longer the monarch, but just another passerby. She'd glance at Maplewood Ridge, the place she once ruled, now thriving without her. Funny how tyrants forget when you build power on fear. All it takes is one act of defiance to make the whole structure crumble. And sometimes that act of defiance comes with teeth.